An unsettling question hangs in the air of history, a question whispered in corridors of power and debated in the hushed tones of academia. It's a question that has fueled both admiration and the darkest of conspiracies. Why is it that a people who have faced exile, relentless persecution, and existential threats for millennia, who today represent a mere fraction of the global population, appear so disproportionately represented in the highest echelons of wealth and influence? The narrative of Jewish history is a tapestry woven with threads of profound sorrow and inexplicable success, a paradox that defies simple explanation. To even approach this question is to walk a tightrope, balancing on the edge of dangerous stereotypes and uncomfortable truths. But to ignore it is to shy away from understanding one of the most remarkable stories of human resilience, intellectual achievement, and economic adaptation ever told. We are not here to traffic in myths or conspiracies, but to dissect a complex historical reality, layer by layer. This is not a story about a monolithic group, but about a civilization whose core values, historical circumstances, and unwavering communal bonds forged a unique and often misunderstood path through history. Before we delve into the heart of this intricate story, if you find this exploration of history and culture compelling, take a moment to support the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your engagement allows us to continue tackling these complex and important subjects. The journey to understanding this phenomenon does not begin with gold, but with a scroll. It begins with the radical idea, ancient and profound, that the highest duty of a person is to learn. Long before universal literacy was even a dream for the rest of the world, it was becoming a fundamental pillar of Jewish life. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the physical center of Judaism was obliterated. The religion, facing annihilation, underwent a revolutionary transformation. It became a portable faith, one that lived not in a single temple, but in the minds of its people and within the pages of its sacred texts. Rabbis and sages decreed that every Jewish father had an obligation to teach his son to read the Torah. This wasn't merely a suggestion, it was a divine commandment, a sacred duty. Synagogues became houses of study, and teachers, or rabbis, became the most revered figures in the community, more so than warriors or kings. This religious mandate had a profound and unforeseen economic consequence. In an agrarian world where the vast majority of the population was illiterate, tied to the land they worked, the Jews became a people of letters. Their literacy rate was astoundingly high compared to the societies they lived within. This unique skill set, cultivated for spiritual reasons, became an invaluable economic asset. As empires rose and fell, as trade routes expanded and economies grew more complex, the demand for literate and numerate individuals skyrocketed. Who could be trusted to keep ledgers, draft contracts, manage complex supply chains, and engage in long-distance trade? The very people who had been training in these cognitive skills for generations. They could read, write, calculate, and, crucially, they could interpret complex legal texts, a skill honed through the study of the Talmud, a vast compendium of Jewish law and ethics. This Talmudic tradition fostered a culture of critical thinking, debate, and legal reasoning that was perfectly suited for the burgeoning worlds of commerce and finance. While farming, the primary occupation of the ancient world, required physical strength and knowledge of the seasons, it offered little advantage to the literate. In fact, the cost of educating children was a significant economic burden for a farming family. This led to a gradual yet monumental shift. Over centuries, Jews began to voluntarily move away from agriculture and into urban centers, where their literacy and numeracy gave them a distinct competitive advantage. They became craftsmen, merchants, doctors, scholars, and financiers, not primarily because of persecution or legal restrictions, though those factors would later play a significant role, but because of a unique cultural advantage that made these professions far more profitable for them. This wasn't a conspiracy for power, it was a rational economic migration driven by a religiously mandated educational advantage. The book became their homeland, and the skills it imparted became their most valuable currency. This migration into urban professions was accelerated and often cemented by waves of persecution. Across Europe and the Middle East, a dark and recurring pattern emerged. As minority communities, Jews were often barred from owning land, the primary source of wealth and status in pre-modern societies. They were also frequently excluded from craft guilds, which controlled entry into many skilled trades. This systematic exclusion, intended to marginalize and impoverish them, had another unintended consequence. It pushed them into the interstitial spaces of the economy, the niches that others either could not or would not fill. One of the most significant of these niches was finance. In medieval Christendom, the Church's strict prohibitions against usury, the lending of money at interest, applied to Christians. This created a significant economic problem. How could commerce, which depends on credit, flourish? The solution, for many rulers and nobles, was to allow and even encourage Jews to fill this role. Legally unrestricted by canon law, Jewish communities became the continent's financiers. They provided an essential economic service, fueling the ambitions of kings and the expansion of trade, but it also made them intensely vulnerable. They became associated with the often unpopular practice of money lending, which made them easy scapegoats in times of economic hardship. If a noble defaulted on a loan, it was often easier to expel the lender and seize their assets than to repay the debt. This reality shaped a particular economic mindset. When your property and your very life could be taken from you at a moment's notice, fixed assets like land became a liability. Wealth had to be portable. Gold, jewels, and, most importantly, knowledge and commercial connections became the preferred forms of capital. This historical reality fostered expertise in currency exchange, trade finance, and the complex world of international banking. Families like the Rothschilds, who rose from the Frankfurt ghetto to become the bankers of European royalty, are the most famous example of this trajectory, but they were the pinnacle of a much broader phenomenon. Thousands of Jewish families built intricate networks of trade and finance that spanned the continent and beyond. They were forced to become masters of a fluid and often hostile economic environment, developing a keen sense of risk, an ability to adapt quickly, and a reliance on assets that could not be easily confiscated. Their exclusion from traditional paths to wealth forced them to innovate, to find value in the abstract world of finance and trade, and in doing so, they laid some of the foundational blocks of modern capitalism. The engine of this economic activity was not solely individual ambition, but a powerful and deeply ingrained sense of collective responsibility. Scattered across the globe, living as minorities in often hostile lands, Jewish communities developed exceptionally strong internal networks built on a foundation of shared faith, a common legal framework, and mutual trust. A merchant in Venice could do business with a counterpart in Amsterdam or Istanbul with a high degree of confidence, even if they had never met. Their shared identity as Jews, their adherence to the principles of Jewish law, halakha, which governed commercial disputes, and their reliance on communal reputation created a powerful form of social collateral. A letter of credit from a trusted Jewish banker in one city would be honored by another in a distant port. This network functioned like an early multinational corporation, facilitating the flow of goods, capital, and information across vast distances with remarkable efficiency. This system was vital in an era when international law was nascent, and enforcing contracts across borders was nearly impossible. Trust was the most valuable commodity, and Jewish commercial networks were rich in it. At the heart of this communal cohesion was the concept of tzedakah, often translated as charity. Its Hebrew root more accurately means justice or righteousness. Giving to the poor and supporting the community was not seen as an act of magnanimous generosity, but as a moral and religious obligation, a fundamental duty to restore balance and justice to the world. The revered Jewish philosopher Maimonides outlined a famous hierarchy of giving, with the highest form being to provide someone with the means to become self-sufficient, such as an interest-free loan or the opportunity for a job. This principle had a profound economic impact. Communal funds, known as gemachs, provided interest-free loans for everything from starting a business to covering unexpected expenses. This created a powerful internal safety net. It ensured that promising entrepreneurs could access startup capital without resorting to predatory lenders. It meant that a family facing a sudden crisis would be supported by the community, preventing a slide into destitution. This wasn't simply altruism, it was a strategic investment in the community's human capital. By ensuring that every member had the opportunity to succeed and a cushion against failure, the community as a whole became more resilient and prosperous. This internal welfare system fostered a culture of entrepreneurship and risk-taking, knowing that the community provided a backstop. It ensured that the collective knowledge, skills, and resources were constantly being reinvested within the group, creating a virtuous cycle of economic growth and social stability that was rare in the pre-modern world. While external pressures and internal networks shaped the economic trajectory of the Jewish people, it is impossible to ignore the profound impact of a culture that has, for centuries, placed an almost unparalleled value on intellectual pursuit and academic excellence. The reverence for the scholar, inherited from ancient traditions, evolved over time into a deep-seated cultural emphasis on secular education. As the Enlightenment swept across Europe and legal barriers began to fall, Jews embraced the new opportunities for higher education with extraordinary fervor. For generations, they had been a people of the book. Now, they applied that same dedication to the books of science, medicine, law, and philosophy. The results of this cultural predisposition are staggering and can be quantified in one of the most prestigious metrics of intellectual achievement: the Nobel Prize. Despite constituting less than 0.2% of the world's population, individuals of Jewish descent have been awarded over 20% of all Nobel Prizes. The numbers are particularly striking in fields that require deep abstract and analytical thinking. Approximately 25% of Nobel laureates in physics, 26% in physiology or medicine, and an astounding 41% in economic sciences have been Jewish. Figures like Albert Einstein, whose theories of relativity redefined our understanding of the universe, Niels Bohr, a pioneer of quantum mechanics, and Milton Friedman, a transformative figure in modern economics, are not outliers but representatives of a broader cultural pattern. This incredible overrepresentation is not evidence of any innate intellectual superiority, a dangerous and baseless notion. Rather, it is the predictable outcome of a culture that has, for millennia, relentlessly promoted critical thinking, rigorous study, and intellectual inquiry as core values. When a community consistently tells its children that the highest human calling is to learn and to question, it produces a disproportionate number of people equipped to excel at the highest levels of academic and scientific endeavor. This success, in turn, translates into economic prosperity and influence. The innovations born from this intellectual ferment in medicine, technology, finance, and the arts have not only benefited the Jewish community but have profoundly shaped the modern world. The doctor who pioneers a new life-saving procedure, the scientist who develops a groundbreaking technology, or the economist whose theories guide national policy, naturally accrue both wealth and societal influence. This intellectual heritage, born in ancient houses of study and honed through centuries of debate over sacred texts, found a new and powerful expression in the laboratories and universities of the modern world, becoming a key driver of the very success we seek to understand. However, to paint a picture of universal wealth and power, is to create a dangerous and misleading caricature. The narrative of Jewish economic history is not a monolithic success story. For every Rothschild, there were thousands of impoverished peddlers in the shtetls of Eastern Europe. For every Nobel laureate, there were countless families struggling to survive in the ghettos of Warsaw or the tenements of New York's Lower East Side. The Jewish community, like any other global population, is incredibly diverse, with vast disparities in wealth, education, and social standing. In major centers of Jewish life, such as Israel and the United States, significant portions of the population live at or below the poverty line. In particular, certain ultra-Orthodox communities, which prioritize religious study over secular employment, often experience high rates of poverty. Furthermore, Jewish communities in different parts of the world have vastly different economic realities, from the thriving tech entrepreneurs of Tel Aviv to struggling communities in Latin America or the former Soviet Union. The focus on the astounding success of a visible minority can obscure the daily struggles of the majority and feed into the harmful stereotype of the rich Jew, a canard that has been used for centuries to justify resentment and incite violence. It is crucial to recognize that the factors we have discussed, literacy, urban specialization, communal networks, and educational focus, are not magic formulas for guaranteed wealth. They are, instead, historical and cultural currents that created opportunities and fostered certain skills. They represent a statistical predisposition, not an individual destiny. Many Jews did not or could not capitalize on these advantages. Many were victims of persecution so severe that no amount of resilience or ingenuity could overcome it, culminating in the Holocaust, which systematically destroyed the vast human and economic capital of European Jewry. The story is one of averages and tendencies, not of universal truths. The question is not why every Jew is rich and powerful. They are not, but why the historical and cultural conditions of this particular diaspora group created pathways that allowed for a disproportionate number of its members to achieve extraordinary success against overwhelming odds. Acknowledging the internal diversity and the reality of poverty within the Jewish community is essential for a complete and honest understanding, stripping away the myth and replacing it with a more complex and far more human reality. In weaving together these threads of history, culture, and circumstance, a complex but coherent picture emerges. The question of why Jewish people have achieved a notable level of wealth and power is not answered by simplistic or conspiratorial theories, but by a deep understanding of a unique civilizational journey. It began with a religious revolution that made literacy a sacred duty, transforming a nation of farmers into a people of the book. This intellectual foundation provided a crucial advantage in a world that was increasingly dominated by commerce and complex transactions. The painful history of persecution and exclusion, which barred them from land ownership and traditional guilds, paradoxically pushed them into the nascent fields of finance and international trade, where their skills and networks could be most effectively deployed. This diaspora existence, fraught with peril, necessitated the creation of powerful, trust-based communal networks that functioned as global systems of mutual support and commercial exchange. At the core of these networks was the principle of tzedakah, a commitment to justice that ensured the community's human capital was nurtured and protected, creating a resilient and entrepreneurial ecosystem. Finally, as the modern world dawned, the ancient reverence for learning found new expression in the relentless pursuit of secular education, leading to extraordinary contributions in science, medicine, and academia, which in turn generated both influence and economic rewards. This is not a story of a single cause, but of a powerful confluence of factors, a feedback loop where religious values fostered economic skills, persecution sharpened financial acumen, and communal solidarity amplified individual success. It is a testament to how a people, stripped of land and state, made knowledge their territory and resilience their armor, turning historical disadvantages into engines of remarkable achievement. The narrative is a profound reminder that the roots of economic destiny are often found not in material resources, but in the intangible wealth of culture, community, and an unyielding commitment to the power of the human mind.